Hi, I'm Madison. They flew to Maui with mojitos and malice, while I walked into a kitchen that smelled like bleach and cold pizza. Walter was 79 that day. His wheelchair faced an empty chair. No cake, no candles. Just a slice of congealed pepperoni on a paper towel and a silence so thick it felt rehearsed. Jason once told me, "You've done enough already." Sierra smiled and added, "Let the real family handle it this year." So I brought his favorite vanilla sponge anyway. They FaceTimed from a tiki bar, laughed when I held the phone up to Walter, toasted with tropical drinks while he blinked at the wall. "Hope the nurse remembered candles," Sierra said. "Just keep him upright, Madison," Jason added. "Try not to break anything." Then Walter stood, without warning, without a sound. He looked me in the eye and whispered, "It's showtime." Ever been left behind, only to realize you were the only one holding the truth? Before we begin, tell me, who in your life showed up when no one else did? They went to Hawaii. I stayed, and walked into a kitchen that smelled like bleach and old betrayal. The porch light hadn't been turned on. That was the first sign. Usually by this hour, just after 5, the motion sensor would have caught me fumbling with the keys and blinked awake like a tired sentinel. But today, the front steps were draped in early dusk, and the air hung too quiet, too still for a birthday evening. I knocked once, twice. No answer. Jason had said, "You don't have to come this year." Sierra had smiled that rehearsed smile of hers and added, "You've done enough already." But Walter was turning 79. You don't miss a birthday at 79. Not when the man in question raised your husband, taught your daughter how to fold origami animals out of napkins, and once, years ago, cried softly when you made him peach cobbler from scratch. I pushed the door open gently. The bolt was off. The house was cold. "Walter?" I called out. No response. The kitchen light was on, flickering slightly, casting a yellowish sheen on the granite countertop. The scent hit me first. Disinfectant and something older, sadder. Pizza, maybe. Old pizza. The kind that's been microwaved once, then forgotten. I turned the corner. He sat there in his wheelchair, right by the edge of the table. A paper towel was laid out in front of him like a placemat, and on it, one slice of pepperoni pizza, congealed and drooping. His eyes weren't on the food, but on the chair at the head of the table. Empty. The once mahogany seat was now dulled by years of use, a faint impression worn into the leather cushion. That had always been his spot. "Walter," I said softly. He turned. No words. Just a slow blink. His posture seemed smaller than I remembered, folded in on itself, wrapped in silence. I walked over and placed the cake box on the counter. Inside was his favorite, vanilla sponge with raspberry jam and buttercream frosting. I'd written his name 3 times on the card before settling on the right version. Dad felt too presumptuous. Walter, too formal. In the end, I simply wrote, "You're seen. Happy birthday." My phone buzzed. Jason. FaceTime. I answered. And just like that, the kitchen vanished. In its place, waves, sunlight, tiki torches. Jason grinned from a cabana, shirt unbuttoned, a Mai Tai in one hand. Sierra was beside him in a sun hat, oversized sunglasses, her hair impossibly perfect despite the humidity. "Hey, babe," Jason chirped. "Happy birthday, Walter," Sierra called out, waving. Walter didn't move. "Hope the nurse remembered candles," Sierra added, and laughed. Jason joined in, their laughter a little too loud, too eager. I held up the phone toward Walter. He blinked once, then turned away. "Madison, we'll toast to him tonight, okay?" Jason said, blowing a kiss. "Wish you were here." "You told me not to come," I reminded him. "Oh, well, yeah. Just figured it'd be crowded. Plus, family dynamics and all." Family dynamics. As if I were a rogue variable in their perfect equation. The call ended. Silence fell again. I reached for a glass from the cabinet. Empty. Not just that. Gone. The glasses were gone, cupboards half bare, plates stacked in a pile like someone was halfway through packing. I pulled out my phone again and tapped into Instagram. Sierra's story had been updated 32 minutes ago. It was a video. Clinking glasses, golden hour lighting, laughter. Caption: Hope he's enjoying cold carbs and warmer pity. Maui moments. I put the phone down slowly. Cold carbs. Walter was still staring at the chair. You knew they'd leave, I whispered. He didn't answer, but then with the slowest of motions, he placed both hands on the armrests of his wheelchair. Walter? I moved toward him, afraid he might fall. He pushed. Once. Twice. The wheels creaked, then locked. His left foot shifted, then the right. And with an almost imperceptible grunt, he stood. The chair squeaked behind him as his body straightened, bones protesting, legs trembling. My hands flew to my mouth. He turned to me, and in that moment, the weariness fell away. His eyes sharpened. Not angry, not bitter. Just ready. It's showtime, he said. I whispered, You can walk? He replied, Walk? Not quite, but I can still stand, and that changes everything. They think I'm losing memory, Walter muttered. They forgot I was trained to remember under fire. Sunday morning arrived in fragments. Light sliced through the blinds in uneven bars, and the house creaked like it was exhaling memories. I had barely slept. The smell of bleach still lingered in the kitchen, clinging to the corners like regret. Walter was already up, waiting by the hallway in his wheelchair, fully dressed, hair combed, shoes on. Come, he said, not asking. I followed without a word. He turned down the hall, past the guest bedroom, and stopped in front of the linen closet. His hand reached under the lowest shelf, pressing something behind a stack of old towels. A faint click. The wall panel to the left shifted, just slightly, but enough for me to see the narrow staircase behind it. This house has its own secrets, he said. Time to meet them. The attic had always been forbidden territory. Jason once called it a fire hazard full of old junk, and Sierra had named it the dungeon. I hadn't been up here since before Ella was born. The air grew dry and thin as we climbed. Dust particles danced in shafts of light, and every step groaned underfoot like it resented being remembered. Walter wheeled himself forward with surprising agility once we reached the landing. He nodded toward a stack of crates. Top one, the navy blue Bible. I hesitated. The one with the frayed corner, he added. I pulled it out. It felt heavier than it should have. Inside, wedged between Genesis and Psalms, was an envelope, slightly yellowed. Beneath it, a black flash drive, a note tucked into a false bottom cutout, and a folded sheet of legal paper. I opened the envelope. The letter was in his handwriting. If they ever turn my house into a tombstone for their greed, you hold the light. WB. It wasn't just a message, it was a passing of the torch. The folded sheet? A copy of the will, updated, dated, notarized. My name. Only mine. Not Jason. Not Sierra. My hands trembled as I looked back at him. You were going to tell me... When? When they made their move. I tried to speak, but the words scattered. He nodded toward the beam in the ceiling. Look inside the vent. There's one more thing. I climbed the stepladder he had placed nearby. The beam had a narrow slit along its side. Inside, wrapped in felt, was a tiny black hard drive. Fingerprint encrypted. Back downstairs, we connected it to my laptop. The folders were cleanly labeled. Dates, locations, timestamps. Nothing looked forced or rushed. Walter had been collecting data for over a year. The camera footage showed things I wasn't ready for. Jason rolling his eyes as Walter asked for water, then muttering, He's gonna die on a Tuesday. Watch. Sierra whispering over legal forms, her voice flippant. No one looks at signature spacing anyway. Then laughing as she slid a paper across the table. The notary wasn't even visible. I paused the clip, bile rising. Walter's voice was even. That was 3 months ago, the morning after your anniversary. I stared at the screen. Sierra's voice echoed, smug, untouchable. They underestimated you, I whispered. He smiled faintly. I counted on it. I picked up the second flash drive, already prepared with backups. Walter had labeled it insurance in Sharpie. I plugged it into my laptop and began compressing the files. I sent a duplicate straight to Halpern, an old law school friend who owed me more than one favor. What happens now? I asked. Walter looked toward the window where the sun had just crested over the fence, pouring gold over the dried leaves in the yard. Now we let them think we're still cleaning up crumbs. I pulled out my phone again, uploaded a password-protected folder to the cloud, then pocketed the USB. If they wanted to erase me, I said, let's see how they handle the cloud. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the volume. Monday night draped itself in silence. The kind of silence that crackles, not with peace, but with waiting. Walter sat in his wheelchair near the window, hands steepled, face unreadable. The cake from Saturday still sat under a glass dome, untouched, wilting. I'd wiped the counters twice, reheated tea 3 times, and finally sat down with my laptop and a stack of folders. I slid my phone to the center of the table. The screen was dark, but I knew what would come. They always called at night when guilt dissolved into liquor and inhibitions turned into declarations. Jason had always had a mouth. Sierra, a gift for casual cruelty. Walter said nothing. He looked like a general before the first shot, measured, unsentimental. The call came at 9:12 p.m. Jason, I answered, voice even. Yes? Hey, where's Dad's meds? The debit card's not going through. He didn't say please, didn't ask how are you, just barreled in like always. Why do you need the card? There was the sound of clinking glasses. To refill his prescriptions, or whatever. We figured you'd know where the logins are. The we wasn't subtle. I could hear Sierra giggling in the background. Jason? Sierra cooed, her voice rising like champagne foam. Ask her if she's enjoying being Florence Nightingale. He laughed. You mean Nurse Madison? Come on, babe, she's always wanted to matter. I pressed speakerphone. Walter reached forward and hit record. Jason kept going, unaware. Anyway, he continued, once we get him into Meadowbrook, no more guilt, no more daily check-ins. Just beachfront living, right? Meadowbrook? I repeated carefully. Yeah, Sierra chimed in. It's basically a resort for the elderly, with better wine lists than ours. We just need that one evaluation. Say he's declined enough, and boom, power of attorney transfers. Jason added, the nurse from last year already owes us. She'll fudge the report. No more caretaking drama. I looked at Walter. His expression hadn't changed. Seriously, Jason went on, we've earned this. After everything we put up with, Mom's funeral, his nonsense rants about war stories. Come on, we deserve the estate. Deserve, I said softly. Jason didn't catch the tone. Exactly. I mean, no offense, but you and Dad? You're like squatters with keys. Then the silence broke. Walter leaned slightly forward and said with perfect clarity, hello, son. Dead pause. Dad? Jason's voice cracked. Walter didn't blink. Funny how clear things sound when you're not pretending to be asleep. On the other end, scrambling, voices, muffled curses, Sierra yelling, hang up. Click. The call ended. Walter stared at the phone, then turned to me. I was still frozen, processing the fact that his voice, once thin and brittle, had just sliced through them like a scalpel. That'll make a solid Exhibit A, I said, reaching for the USB. Walter nodded, gaze steady. Send it to Halpern. Tonight. I uploaded the file, encrypted it, and sent it off. The ping of the email confirmation was barely audible, but it felt seismic. We sat in silence again, but this time it was different. Charged. Walter looked at me, voice low but sure. They just gave us the nail. Now we build the coffin. This is a formality. Sierra smirked. Dad's practically signed already. I smiled back. Then you won't mind if we read it aloud. The conference room at Halpern and Ward was sterile and smug. Frosted glass, black leather chairs, a long polished table that reflected everyone's expressions too honestly. Cold lighting pooled across sleek legal pads, untouched water pitchers, and the neat stack of documents Sierra had insisted on bringing herself. Jason adjusted his cufflinks as if he were closing a $1 million deal. Sierra had gone with a cream blazer and glossy lips, already rehearsing her victory face. Neither of them noticed that Halpern hadn't offered them coffee. Walter sat quietly beside me, eyes unreadable. He wore a navy suit he hadn't touched in years. No wheelchair today. Just a cane, and the steadiness of someone who knew every move had already been made. Halpern opened the meeting with lawyerly calm. Today's purpose is the execution of a healthcare proxy document, he said, flipping to the front page Jason had drafted. Prepared by Mr. Jason Blake, designating himself and Mrs. Sierra Blake as responsible parties for Walter Blake Sr.'s medical decisions. Jason smiled tightly. All routine. Sierra leaned forward. We thought it'd be easier this way. Clean, secure. I reached into my folder, pulled out a copy of the estate reallocation file, and laid it flat on the table between us. Then let's cross-reference some terms before signing, I said. Just a precaution. Sierra arched an eyebrow. What is that? Halpern adjusted his glasses. A document signed by Mr. Walter Blake on April 4th of this year, transferring primary authority and sole estate designation to Madison Blake Jason let out a sharp laugh. That's fake. Sierra grinned. Come on, that's not even his real signature. You think a scribble in April means anything? I opened my laptop. The video played instantly. Silent, crisp, undeniable. There Walter sat, at the exact same kitchen table, dated timestamp in the corner. He read each page out loud before signing. His hand was steady, his voice firm. In the corner of the frame, Sierra's reflection could be seen, watching from the hallway. Jason's face drained of color. That was months ago, before Dad's memory started slipping. Halpern slid another file across the table. Neurological evaluation conducted independently last Thursday. Dr. Alana Rhee. Cognitive scores in the 94th percentile for Walter's age group. No signs of impairment. Silence fell like a gavel. Walter shifted slightly. The creak of his chair felt louder than thunder. You knew I wasn't sick, he said, voice cool, steady. You just hoped I'd stay silent. Jason opened his mouth, then closed it. His tie looked too tight. I leaned back in my chair, watching Sierra stiffen. She whispered, almost too quiet to hear. You said he couldn't walk. Jason looked like he'd been slapped. I nodded toward Halpern. Let's proceed. They laughed when I brought the Bible. They stopped laughing when I opened it. City Hall smelled like old paper and quiet threats. The notary public's office was narrow and lined with file cabinets that hadn't moved in decades. No dramatic windows, no sweeping conference tables this time. Just silence, a ticking clock, and a weight in the air that no one wanted to name. Halpern cleared his throat, tapping the folder in front of him with deliberate precision. Jason and Sierra sat to my left, both dressed like mourners who'd already spent the inheritance. Walter sat beside me, eyes sharp but hands still. There was no cane today, just presence. This is a recertification, Halpern began, to verify the validity and execution of Mr. Walter Blake Sr.'s estate documents, including his amended will and attached handwritten statement. Jason scoffed. This again? Sierra leaned forward, saccharine in her sarcasm. Are we going to start cross-stitching our legal documents now? I didn't reply. Instead, I reached into my bag and placed the old, weathered Bible on the table. Leather cracked at the edges. The room shifted. Jason's eyes narrowed. Sierra gave a small laugh. Religious guilt hour? I opened the Bible to the hollowed center and removed the folded letter. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were steady, the handwriting unmistakable. Halpern unfolded it carefully. This letter, dated April 3rd, is a codicil. Accompanied the formal will, also dated within 24 hours. Both signed in the presence of a notary and, as required, 2 witnesses. Sierra tilted her head. There were no witnesses. The door opened behind us with a gentle knock. A woman stepped in. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong, and she smelled faintly of peppermint and dust. Mrs. Johnson. She looked exactly as I remembered from junior high. Apologies, she said softly. The buses are never on time. Sierra blinked. Who is this? Mrs. Ruth Johnson. Halpern said, standing. Librarian, former teacher, legal witness to the codicil. Jason looked from her to the letter. This is ridiculous. Mrs. Johnson adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Sierra. He walked into my library, she said gently, not rolled. He asked for my signature, explained everything, and insisted on donating the antique set of Civil War maps he found in the attic. Sierra's lips parted, then closed again. I passed Halpern a small printout, still from the security footage 3 months ago. Walter, seated in the kitchen, reading the letter aloud before signing it. Time-stamped, steady-handed, undisputed. Halpern turned toward Jason. Do you deny this is your father's handwriting? Jason hesitated. His mouth opened slightly, but no words followed. He glanced at Sierra. She didn't return the look. Instead, she studied the floor as if it might crack open and take her somewhere less humiliating. Silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't end a moment. It defines it. Walter leaned slightly forward and whispered, You stole my health. But I still own my word. They left an empty chair for him last year. This year, it's their seats that stayed vacant. The backyard shimmered beneath a canopy of soft golden lights. Strings of bulbs swayed gently from the old oak to the porch beam, casting honey-colored halos over the table below. A white cloth ran its full length, interrupted only by yellow daisies in mason jars, and a cake so carefully decorated it looked like forgiveness carved in sugar. Jazz floated from the Bluetooth speaker by the grill. Ella Fitzgerald humming something about second chances. Walter sat at the head of the table. No wheelchair, no cane. Just a glass of sparkling cider in front of him and a serenity that felt earned. I had sent the invitations days ago, not to Jason or Sierra, but to everyone else who had been there all along. Walter's old Navy buddies, the next-door neighbor who brought soup during flu season, the postman who always waved, people who showed up without asking what they'd get in return. Jason's name had still appeared in my inbox that morning. Subject: Sorry about how things turned out. No body text, no follow-up. Sierra hadn't written anything. Just returned the envelope I sent. Still sealed. No message, no handwriting. Just a cold little tombstone of paper. I hadn't expected more. Or less. The guests clinked glasses and shared quiet laughter over pulled pork sliders and caramelized onions. Walter beamed at each of them like a lighthouse, not needing to say much. He had already said enough in courtrooms and conference rooms. Midway through dinner, he gently reached over and placed a small brass key in my hand. For the safe, he said. You protect my name. Now use it for something greater. I didn't ask what was in it. I didn't need to. The trust in his voice was weight enough. When dessert was brought out, a 2-tier vanilla bean cake with blue accents, I caught a glimpse of the chair at the far end of the yard. The same chair Walter had sat in last year. This time it was empty again, but different. A breeze lifted the linen draped over it. No one touched it. No one needed to. Its vacancy said more than any confrontation ever could. Walter raised his glass. To those who stayed when I sat, he said, eyes meeting mine. And to those who stood when I needed them. A soft round of applause rippled through the table. As the guests returned to their conversations, I stood and took a step toward the yard. past the laughter, past the plates, toward the quiet. I looked at the chair, its silhouette framed by light. Beyond the fence, I swore I saw a figure standing, still, uncertain, waiting for an invitation that would never come. I whispered, just loud enough for the wind to carry it. Let them watch from outside. The laughter faded, but the echo of betrayal lingered, until truth took its rightful seat at the table. What began as silence became a force that exposed greed, deception, and the arrogance of those who believed themselves untouchable. Justice didn't knock loudly. It entered with quiet resolve and undeniable proof. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to stand, so others never have to kneel again. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth.